I'm Marina Marco O'Malley. I have two children in the district, one in Montessori and one in Myers.
I'm Bridget Dolan, president of ACTA.
Bill Lemon, I have one daughter over that had just left Eagle Point with no attacking.
I'm Julia Harrell. I have a new ninth grader who was at Hackett and a new sixth grader who was at Easttown Elementary School. I also have a 24-year-old who did first through 12 in the district.
Michelle Bridgewater, I have a daughter at Montessori, I'm the district improvement director and president of the administrative union.
I'm Doreen Sola. I have a daughter in the English language program, Sarah Neal. Both my kids were at Delaware Community School until recently, and I have an eighth grader at.
And we'll be that next. So today is really going to be a work session, a true work session, open discussion, just kind of getting your thoughts and seeing what some of the scenarios are. If there are other scenarios, we just wanted to get your, just kind of help you see with multiple scenarios what the school might look like in terms of achievement. And we talked about utilizing the NWEA scores, which we use more because we can see the growth of our students more so than just the hardline achievement. And we use that really for instruction. And so you'll see that on the top sheet that you have, it gives you the legend of what the scenarios are for scenario 1, and then you can see which schools those are. Scenario 2, 3, and 4. You can look at those. Excuse me. You can see from the list of elementary schools what the average of winter to spring conditional growth percentile would be and where the schools would rank. And that's for all 5th grade combined. The second handout, you're looking at the math scores, and then you're looking at the reading scores. And these are for our current 5th graders, okay? We were not able to pull out, well, I won't say we were not able to pull out. We pulled out magnet, but the numbers were not that significant when we put the magnets in there by address, or if we kept them in the magnet, it did not cause that much of a difference. So we chose to go ahead and keep them together as a school because then we didn't see that much of a difference. The spreadsheet, well, let's see, which one is next? Okay, so this, excuse me. This is the district's scenarios that you have. And so what you get to see side by side, you get to see what North Albany would look like for each scenario. And the predicted reading score is blue, the predicted math score is orange. You can see what Harriet Myers looks like, and you can compare that across the scenarios. And then you also have William Hackett. And then we can look at what that looks like for scenario 1 for each of the schools. We can compare scenario 2, 3, and 4. And that would be that vertical representation. So if you wanted to take the pages apart, you could, and that way you could see them going vertically. Mr. Katz was, I know that he was going to call in, and so we're waiting because the spreadsheet that you see, he did some work and pulled together the information in a different way, looking at different scenarios, and we were going to have him explain his methodology. And I thought that was fantastic because it's a different way of looking at it. And I don't know what the key means, with like the yellow highlights. I'm not sure what that means. But what you can see in the middle of the page with the green and pink highlights, you can see what each school would look like based on the district scenarios, and then other scenarios, for example, where we have scenario 5, current, but all magnet schools unassigned. What does it look like? Scenario 6, minimal disruption, and he has Eagle Point out, and I don't know what that means.
I think that means I think the reason there is 6, 7, 8. I spent a lot of time with it this afternoon. I think in those 6, 7, and 8, he's moving one school to North Albany.
Right, okay,
And so in one, doing either Eagle Point or Montessori or Pine Hills, North Albany, to see how that shifts the balance of the
Okay.
schools.
okay.
I don't understand everything he did. I did figure out most of it.
Right. So, hopefully he will join us soon, and then that way, I'm happy to give him the floor to explain it, so that, we can take a look at, a different way of looking at it, which is fine, because that's the whole purpose of what we're doing. And if you come up with any other, ideas or different scenarios, could we try this, could we try that? More than happy to do that, because that's what our work session is about today. The outcome of today may not be to find an answer. It may just say, we need to digest this a little bit more and come back and then look at what some other scenarios might be. And that's totally fine, because this is a work session tonight to kind of get some ideas and see what we may be looking at. So I just open the floor up for some discussion at this time.
I spent a lot of time this afternoon playing with fan scenarios that I appreciated in both the district, and then tweaking, playing, well, what if we did this school, what if we did this, and we're playing these numbers. And I have some sort of like scenario 4.1, I have some others that I came up with. But leaving that aside, I have questions. I don't think I understand this sheet as well as I would like to. And I guess so I would go there. So I see these horizontal lines, but some of them, like each one only has 3 horizontal lines. Why is the 4th line missing? For instance, North Albany reading, the blue horizontal line. Why do I not see that on that first page?
Because, so look at Harriet Myers, Stephen and Harriet Myers, you see how the blue and the gray are almost merged together? It means that blue line is merged in,
So that gray line is there, it's just sort of under the blue line.
yes. And that means that those are very
Right on.
similar, they're right on.
So for North Albany, which is it the gray, is it the
It
yellow?
looks like, so for the top one, those two are the yellow, why am I saying?
For
The
North
yellow,
Albany, it's
orangey
yellow.
one, and the blue one are kind of together, but it shows up gray.
Okay.
So that they're very similar to the, district NWEA map.
So in a perfect world, if we could create the perfect balance of this, which of course we can't do, but if we could, what is our goal? But we're looking for everything to be closer to the district average. That would be the perfect balance.
That would be the perfect balance, closest to the district average or above.
But if everything could be above average.
Right.
Like open up, like we really have. What's how far close to the national average, the district average?
I don't have that information. I can pull that and we can.
The reason I'm asking is because I know that the district average is the district average, but the goal is to get our students to a certain point. Right?
And we would even look more closely at what is the state.
The state, right?
Yeah, what is the state? And that is available, but we just didn't pull it and I don't have it off the top of my head.
I will say, because we're using a growth percentile, 50 means you're getting a year for a year of instruction or a year for a year of growth. So anything above means you're closing gaps.
Okay. So we want the numbers to be above 50.
We sure do.
And
That
as
is
far away from 50, from 50 as possible.
Where we have kids who are behind, yes.
So these are percentages, where, because it's 63 to 48. I can't, those are percentages?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm so confused. Sorry. So for instance, to look at math, top yellow line, district math is 61% of the average. In every scenario, that yellow line is the highest line. Wouldn't we, if that's the district's own average, wouldn't we expect some schools to be above average and some schools to be above below, or some need to be above average and some to be below average? Or not, explain this, what am I not understanding?
We would, so you can look at individually what it would be here. And you'll see where we are, where we actually,
This one is
so
a
if
math
you look
line.
at math, and if you look at, you'll see.
So the reason why these are always going to come out below average is because there are enough schools who have scores that are below district average. That when you group those schools together into middle schools, they're always going to bring that average down. But why?
Because of where our scores are, I have to qualify that, yes. So if you look at, so look at the handout that has math on.
Yeah.
And it's the math. So let's say that all of our schools were 68 or above.
Right.
Then that would be different. So based on what the scores are, the answer to your question is yes. So you can't say that they're always going to be low. That's not necessarily true. Because if the scores were higher, then that would be.
But this isn't the average, what we're looking at here is not the average of score for each school. It's the growth of it within each school. Isn't that right? Is that what the growth percentile is? So whatever the score for each school is for WBA, it could be 50, it could be 60, it could be 70. The growth of the school, of each school is listed over here and with this chart. So, it's not really,
It's not
telling us what the scores are, it's telling us how much they're going to grow based on the data pulled out, based on the prediction that WA does.
Correct. Because it is what is predicted based on an average.
But the yellow line would also be predicted growth, right?
Bars are predicted growth.
And the horizontal lines, are they not predicted growth? CGP, there's no growth percentage?
No, those are, if you did the average, that's where it falls.
The average score or the average growth? Sorry.
It is the average growth.
Okay. And so I think the reason why the orange vertical bars are always lower than the average than the yellow line for both math is because we have 4 schools whose growth is above that, and however many are left, 7 schools that are below. And that's what's happening here. Okay, that makes sense.
It looks though like a scenario 2, under scenario 2, all 3 middle schools will have the highest amount of growth. Is that right? Am I reading it correct?
Say that again.
What's that?
Say that again.
And under scenario 2, North Albany and Myers would have the highest growth. And Hackett would have it's not the highest growth for sure. But it's still very good. Supposed to be the other ones are more dramatic.
Well, and if we're looking at this is more of a question, if we're looking at how much growth it would be, like not to dismiss the district's average, but it's, to me, I think it's where are they now, which is those 2 bottom rows, regardless of the school, in comparison to the weighted row. So you would be potentially like for Hackett, for scenario 2 right now is 54 for reading and 44 for math. And in scenario 2, they would be 46 and 49. That's what the predicted growth would be under scenario 2.
you can see where there's no perfect world. And I know because I know when I look at it, I'm just gonna say for me, when I look at it, what do we know about what would be the closest growth that all schools would experience? So that no one school is truly sacrificed in any way, and that we are looking at it across the board and all of our students being able to demonstrate growth. And what might get us the closest.
Do we know why with these different schools, why for the, what's it, North Albany and North Albany's reading and North Albany's reading is 78 across, that's current conditional growth center, right? That's current. Those are 78, but everybody else is 54 for the other two schools. Is that just the nature of those schools?
It's just the nature of those schools.
Okay. So it sounds like this is unavoidable, but in some way, with each predicted CGP, it's going to go down a little bit no matter what. For every scenario, if I'm reading it. Like going from, in North Albany, we go from 78 for scenario 1, we go 78 to 63 for the reading. But in math, it would go up in every scenario. Next then it's about finding the least amount of damage in the balance, but I just wanted to jump in. So we go down a little bit for reading.
A little bit.
A little bit.
So why, each scenario is a set of a different combination of elementary schools feeding into North Albany. So why would the reading scores be exactly the same in each scenario? Or the math scores, those are current.
That's the current score.
The last
Current score, but, so this is, does this tell me, that's 78, so that telling me in this combination of schools that we're using for scenario 1, this is what their scores, what their growth would be?
If you look, there's even a pattern for all the schools with regard to the reading scores that because of that combination, the difference is not that great when you look across the board.
It's identical. But how is that possible when these are 4 different, I mean,
So when you look at
scenarios?
look at where they are. So for example, in reading, you have the majority of the schools at 40, between 41 and 48. And depending on the combination, so we can look at what the combinations are, and you can see that most of those scores are going to be very similar. For reading. There's 1, 2, 3 that are either the one that's low and the 2 that are out of that based on where they fall. It's not enough to skew it one way or another. Because the majority of the schools in that block would end up being.
Yes, I find that the Dan has spreadsheets so much easier on my mind around. And the variations seem much clearer, and I actually sort of redid some of his math by merging, I think this is not in the VA numbers that you've given us previously. So I went back to these emails in the previous meeting, added together the ELA math scores. You're like, okay, just like on an SAT, you take your math score, you take your English score, you merge them together, and there's your SAT score. I sort of did that to come up with scores for each school with a couple of years averaged together. And then to me, the different scenarios looked much more dramatically different. It was interesting, they're just different data sets, different ways of looking at how our students are achieving academically.
Are the math scores actually in blue? Because the data I have shows math scores average is 55, but reading average grand total is 44.
I'm sorry, where are you?
I'm looking at this sheet here, but the math values for all the schools,
Mm-hmm.
and then this sheet showing all the English values for all the schools.
Those are only fifth graders and the sheets you have in your hand.
Okay. So this doesn't match up with what's on the data on in the graphs.
These, I'm assuming these are school 6th, 7th, and 8th grade predictions. We only have 5th grade in that other part.
These are the fifth graders and what will be projected to go into the school for sixth grade.
Yeah, the math is 55 and the reading is 45. And yet here it's, the blue shows reading is significantly higher than the math. That didn't seem right.
In which one?
Well, all of these graphs show, well, not all of them. Hold on now.
That's because they're the current grades, they're the
School.
school.
Yeah.
So this is what it would be if, like, scenario one has,
Yeah, the very schools.
at North Albany, scenario one has, yeah. So this would be what, if those fifth graders in those three schools went to North Albany, this is what their percentage they would be.
Okay. Okay.
So on scenario two, you have, two of the magnet schools going feeding into Myers, going to Ashland International District are currently happening. Which we all have two school cases. What's going to be the problem? This will be the problem for me personally here, but we have three middle school. Each national school feeding to one middle school. Not for any other, I mean, but even though the data here doesn't necessarily support dispersing. So, but I mean, it's kind of, feels like that is something that we should consider. Because, I remember from looking at the enrollment pattern criteria, academic program is one of the things that we take into consideration. So,
So you're suggesting disbursement of the magnet schools?
it feels right to me to have each magnet school feed into one of the middle schools. That's what I'm saying.
Does it matter which one?
That's where we go back to the data. How do we actually, disperse them in a way that is, in a combination that is, that creates equity in terms of achievement?
Right now, there's two being magnets, right?
It's to be
Right
right
now,
now.
and the other one being in the Myers. And my story in both. Oh, I very good.
So when I, working off the other spreadsheet, basically generated these merged scores that are made from 2 years of these scores, which is state tests, average, and then ran through your scenarios, Dan's scenarios, and then had to do some balancing in terms of figure out what's the average score for each middle school with each different scenario. And then also what are the numbers of students, because not all elementary schools are the same size. So that too. And then I started trading baseball teams. Okay, so this one's a little too big and the scores are a little higher than the other two. What if we just did a shift around here? So based on that, the most balanced I could get, again, in terms of these state test scores, if you want to have each middle school have the same average state test score, if that was the goal. It's a slightly different goal than growth, NWA growth. I came up with, the closest ones I came up with were district scenarios 1 and 4. And were interesting, but doesn't came as close. And then I was able to tweak those by moving like one school around and come up with what I'm calling scenario 1.1 and 4.1. Scenario 1.1, which is the closest in terms of balanced number of students and state test scores, does happen to have, this wasn't my goal, but it does happen to have a magnitude, because Montessori, North Albany, Ash, and Myers, and Toast have here. And I think it's just
It's
one.
the same before too. The three magnitudes.
Yeah. And it might, but it's.
Where did you have Ash?
And Myers. That's a chance I'm looking to see what the change was I made. Which I think, again, using the state test scores were balanced out a little bit better. It looks like the only, I think the change I made was I moved Giffen from Myers to North Albany. And again, that balanced the numbers of students, if Dan's numbers are accurate here, and also the test scores a little bit. And in my run around scenario, which was almost as balanced, but not quite as much, has Ash and Toast together at half there. So it's interesting that when you're basing it on these averages of the state test scores, to me, the differences look much more stark. And I don't fully understand what Dan's sort of greenish and pinkish. I would love to know explain that, because I was like, this is too much for me. I'm going to ignore that and do my own calculations, but it is interesting. And I'm happy to sort of share I copied the spreadsheet, but I couldn't modify it. Sort of made my own version. And then I thought looking at the numbers of students is actually really interesting and complicates matters. Sometimes you get really nice balance, and you're like, oh.
Well, and that's one of
these
the
are
things
really
that, that's one of the things that we look at, because, you know, right now, our middle schools are sitting at about 700. And that's a lot, because if you recall, we just moved 4 of our elementary schools that had 6th graders into middle school, which now has increased that middle school population. And so we like to look at 650, but we're seeing that our middle schools are running about 700.
Yeah. Do they have more? North Albany?
Well, North Albany is a little smaller because we only have 21 classrooms total. So that's where that kind of weighting is a little bit different. But even when it comes fully online, it's going to be in the high 600.
So that's one of the things that I don't know when I'm looking at it, a little bit information of it. I know we were previously given what the capacity is. Is it the same capacity for each school, or there's some schools that have a little bit more wiggle?
They will have the same capacity.
They all, so they all have the capacity for that 6.
By the time this rolls out,
To the 6 to 7, you know, so we don't have to consider that factor. We don't have to say this.
we just have to make sure that what we predict out is level across the board.
But we don't have to say like this particular school's smaller and can't handle as many. Okay. That makes it a little bit easier.
So my scenario 1.1 is similar to 1, but not exactly. Each 6th grade class would have 175 to 210 students, which is pretty similar in size. It's a range of 35. And all the The average scores, which is a goofy number, it's not being, we're all in the range of 72 to 79. So they're all pretty close to each other. It's interesting to, depending on what data you pull, you come up with such different conclusions.
So would you share, what is your scenario 1?
So my scenario 1.1
1.1?
is, yeah, exactly. It's exactly the same as 1 with a single change. And the only change is, double check that. Yeah, I need to get them from Meyer to North Albany.
Okay, so for 1.1, for the benefit of all of us, what are your schools assigned to Myers?
Myers is Ash, Giffen, New Scotland, and Schuyler.
Ash, Whitman, East Scotland.
And Schuyler.
And then what about North Albany?
North Albany is Arbor Hill, Montessori Magnet, and Sheridan. Again? Arbor Hill, Montessori Magnet, and Sheridan.
And then Hackett?
And then Packet has Delaware, Eagle, Point, Pine Hills, and Toast.
So that's your, all your one.
What was that?
That's your, all your, those are your three.
That's my scenario 1.1, and that was, I just sort of playing and trading things around, and based on the test scores, the state test scores. And I only use 5th grade. I mean, you can pick so many different ways of doing it, but I thought I'm gonna use 5th grade, I'm gonna merge math and ELA, add them together just like you do with SATs, and I'm gonna use 2 years worth, because I thought, who knows what was happening 6 years ago? Is that really fair? So I'm gonna use the 2 most recent years of data available for 5th grade across the board, so it's all the same way.
So, and I'm sorry, I know you just said this, but for your 1.1, North Albany is Ash, Given, New Scotland.
No, I'm sorry. North Albany is, what you just said, Ashton and Scotland's Highway, that's Myers.
Oh, that's.
I mean, I guess it could be anywhere, right? But
Yeah.
many of these make sense. It makes, obviously it makes sense for Ash to go to Myers.
And you might want to look at distances.
Yeah, right.
So Dan has joined us, and so, hi Dan, how are you? So it's so good to see you. I'd like to give you a few minutes. We love the work that you did, so thank you so very much. But we'd like to give you an opportunity to unmute and then explain your spreadsheet. That would be fantastic. Uh-oh, you're still muted.
Do you have a power button?
It shows that he doesn't have a mic.
Can I mute?
Are you talking to me?
No, I'm saying it's from my screen. I can see it's showing that he does not have a mic.
Can you turn our volume up?
Great question.
Bottom right hand side would be the master volume.
Yep. Oh, way down. Say that again, Cecily?
He doesn't have a mic on whatever device he's using.
So it looks like he might be trying to call.
So it's showing no mic. So he's trying to call in.
You could, Dan, can you hear me? Okay, do you have your cell phone? Do you have your cell phone? Okay, call this number, okay? 518-573-6223. Try it one more time. 518-573-6223. There we go. Perfect. Hi, Dan, how are you?
I'm doing all right, sorry, the technology not perfect.
No worries. Okay, I think can we all hear? Okay, so welcome, and we wanted to give you an opportunity to explain your fabulous work so that we can understand the scenarios that you created.
Sure. So I try to keep it simple. The current assignment just was each yellow square just represents a change where that's what it changed to. So in the unique scenario one, the first example, Montessori changed to again. So I highlight it. So all the yellow means is that what's different is that from the status quo. Then, the slight discrepancy for the test scores, I think it really just more about what you have on entering and exiting. So, the currently projected, intellectual currently projected math from highlighting here, those are based on the current feeder patterns. And then if you go scroll down one thing, you see what the current scores and grades and all the things in rows 24, 635. So I didn't have the fifth grade population, but I could find the overall population. And then I just divided it by the number of grades to get an estimated number of people in fifth grade. So I mean, the model's not absolutely perfect because I just didn't know how many people were in fifth grade, but it gets it close. And I used that to basically the impact of that number of students. So, if Scotland is just going to have a bigger impact than Scotland, just 75% bigger. So I mean, that's what I did. I basically multiplied out the number of students, the number of students times the grade, and then I got the median grade, and then was able to calculate what it would be in each school. So if you go to a cell, so then if you go back up a little bit, the red and green just indicates it's the same or better than the status quo. And red just indicates it's worse than the status quo. So if you look at how I calculated it, you basically just sum up the weighted scores and you just divide by the overall number of students that make up that weighted score. And so that's really it. I mean, there's a bunch of different scenarios. I mean, as you can see, there's really no great scenario. I think one scenario I do want to put out there that, I think isn't perfectly captured by this spreadsheet is the scenario 11, one grade person. That, I think as I think of it, people like the high school, but like the elementary school, because they just know their kids are going to get what they need, and that the way the high school really does that is they just have a lot of classes on offer, and they can do that because of the size of the student body. So I think rather than trying to have, 2 or 3 classes of each grade in each school, if you were able to have 9 in those schools for that grade, I think you could probably then have an honors section and extra help section, and you could really drill down into giving kids what they need, and then take out things that are exclusive to 6th graders, same with 8th graders, or whatever. But, that's one scenario. The rest, the first 4 I just modeled what the district sent out. So if you look, if you highlight one of the colored cells, you can see what the formula is for it. And it really just took whatever the schools were in that scenario. So if you go to North Albany for scenario 2, you look at it and it says, I took schools, I took the end schools in that column. Each scenario, because I'm trying to model English and math, just has basic difference. Scenario 1, the scores are and that's pretty much the problem. They're trying to come up with other scenarios, some of them are a little harder to model, just because take anyone anywhere, so, scenario 5, we don't assign them on the matters. I would assume every one of these grades would improve, or change at least. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say, I guess, where kids choose to go, or if you just let people take, or some of the stuff is just hard to follow. But the ones where I could assign kids to a school, that's what I did. And that's pretty much
Question.
Can you explain again what the weighted?
So the number of students, if you go down to the rows like 25, 26, whatever, I want to have to estimate the number of students because I wasn't given the number of people to right? Which is fine. I think it's pretty close. And then, I just did a fraction. So if you go up, highlight, D15 students, C for scores. I summed up the scores, and then I just divided by the total number of students from those contributing students. And so that's, I was trying to think, otherwise I just week to week. And which works fine, it's looking at size, but, I was trying to make it as accurate.
So, Dan, just to take, thank you for all this, I appreciate it, and I spent a bunch of time with your work this afternoon, so it was great to have a jumping off point. So just to go to, I was noticing that your scenario 6 is all green underneath it, so that's what called my attention to it. So just to make sure I'm understanding, so scenario 6 is basically everybody stays where they are now, but Eagle Point to North Albany. So you look down at their ELA scores or ELA, and you've got like 12, 22, 32 are the 3 numbers there. Are you with me so far?
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me well enough?
I can hear you, I'm sorry.
Okay, so under scenario 6 and under their ELA scores, we have 12, or it would average to 13, 22, and 32. Right? So basically we're looking at a situation where, tell me if this is right, the weighted average scores for a Hackett would be, more than double what the average weighted score is for North Albany. So green suggests they're all improving, which is great, but we still have one school that's scores are, more than double another middle school. Do I understand that correctly?
No, yes, and that makes sense because all scenario 5 through 10, our poorest school, all in one middle school.
Right. Okay, and that's what I was trying. So my goal. So Dan highlighting green. Everybody's growing better than the status quo. What I was playing with was how do we get those 3 lines? How do we get the numbers as close together as we can?
Yeah.
Instead of 32 and 12, maybe we're aiming to get everybody to 17, or I don't know what the exact perfect number would be.
And I'm going to say it gets us back to 1-4. Look at 1-4.
Yeah, that's where I landed. Exactly.
Can I try to call Dan into the meeting? Because it's difficult to hear on the live stream.
Okay.
Yeah, try.
Let me see if I can.
I'm trying right now.
Hold on.
Oh,
Yeah, I think it's,
where the numbers are close, 21, 22.
It's the live
So, and that's
Okay.
I got to
Dan,
that.
can you say something now?
Can I trade to get them even closer?
And I didn't get there. I looked at all the board school.
Dan,
It's all
You have to spread them out.
Dan,
I hope, but
Okay, Dan, it shows you have a mic. Can you hear me? Can you unmute your phone? I don't know if I can unmute you.
There it is.
He's on mute.
that's Cecily on mute.
Oh,
So 569 is.
Yeah, see if you, can we unmute him?
No, I can't unmute him. He can only unmute himself.
Dan, can you hear me?
Who's the 569?
That's Dan.
Is Dan? Okay.
1-4.
I don't hear him anymore. He was on my phone.
Maybe hang on.
Dan, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait, I heard something.
Yeah, it's on mute.
It's our
Yeah,
Yep,
There he
turn
is.
up. I can hear you a little bit.
Okay.
There we go,
Can you hear me
yeah.
now? All right. I guess, and I apologize. I have to jump in a minute, and I realize how ridiculous that is. But I think that I'd say there's always going to be a tension in building any of this, and I don't know it's actually that possible. I tried for a while to get even schools, and I think just fundamentally, there are 3 higher scoring schools, there are 3 middle scoring schools, and there are 3 lower scoring schools. And you can assign one at each level to each of the middle schools. And I tried that, but they're not all that even. And then it very much affects the parents that you can do that if you completely disregard what it's like to send your kids to school. And so I just think that we're not going to be able to, I can throw those on the model if you like, but they're not that equal. And it's not possible without just breaking the schools apart and just trying to get an even result. It's not possible by just assigning each school out to get that even of a result. And so, if we want to talk about it, it always comes at the expense of kids and parents. And the way you do it is you make people go across town or you do whatever. And I think that's a real tension that needs to be addressed, that it's not that easy to build even models. And in doing so, it disregards how people want to go to the schools. So, I just say it's not as easy as saying, I'm looking to get the most even thing, because you do that by just sending people all over the place.
Well, scenario 1.1, I would say each middle school has one elementary that's sort of crossing the city. Skylar going across to Myers, or Coach Pine Hills, Eagle Point to Hackett. I mean, none of those do that. There aren't too many. Montessori to North Albany, Skylar, Myers. Everybody else is sort of at a middle school that's relatively close to where they are in the city.
Montessori is not close, but
Montessori not close to anything.
Neither is equal.
right. And I think that, even stuff, even models, that's more about creating an environment where teaching will actually, not to the middle of the road, it will be productive for everyone.
We can walk out.
And closing the gaps. And that's years of research and all that. I think that there are considerations to be made about just like how proximity, regardless of where you go to school. If there's this thought in your school, open enrollment is an option, right? If you're close to the school, that is a current policy that is not really used because we have overcrowding. But it's a policy, and we should keep it. And honestly, the other piece that we're going to have to grapple with for many families is what do you do with families that have more than one child, and they're potentially heading to different schools. Like, that is a consideration, and that has to be addressed.
And transportation.
Yeah, and transportation, which is, honestly, I don't think that it's okay for any student to spend an hour on the bus. We have to figure it out. But with the data we have here, I think that if we're striving to create diverse schools all around, and with teachers that are an instructional program that is that gives every opportunity, we have to have somebody's not going to be happy. That's for sure. And down.
I also had interesting conversations about the idea of one grade, a sixth grade middle school, a seventh grade middle school, eighth grade middle school. And I think it's a sort of a bold idea, even just to grapple with it, and real weaknesses. It has some strengths. It's an interesting thing to think about.
Transportation can be very difficult.
Yeah.
No worse situation.
No, and it takes staff time to build relationships.
To me, the relationships are the number one thing.
Having 3 years of staff who knows me and grows me, it's significant.
That's huge.
For-
I think that's the biggest.
Yeah, middle school, and there's just a role modeling, like, putting a bunch of, oh my God, not a sixth grader, putting a bunch of sixth graders all in one school, you wouldn't like
Well,
that.
but one thing,
But you already have the experience of that.
I'm not saying anyone wants 705 kids
but what,
all year only.
We already have the
That's all
experience of sixth grader. Forgive me for speaking on the stage here. We have the experience of the sixth graders last year, right?
Yes.
So that we're all alone in a school building. I don't know that they actually realize that they are tweens, that they're actually growing, that they were not in elementary school. I don't know that they have. And honestly, I don't know if any research either that supports that. So,
I'll tell you what I agree with all the downsides. What the issue it eliminates is it eliminates communities of school parents living out and saying, I don't want my kids at that school.
Because everybody would.
Because I want to go to Hackett, I want to go to Myers or whatever. I don't want to go to Albany. And the other thing is,
It's gonna happen.
yes.
There is no scenario we can come up with
right,
where there's not gonna be a cohort of parents who are gonna be upset.
right.
And I think
Well,
that
except
as a
scenario
community,
11, which
there is no real option for that. And so we've got to be prepared for that and be really specific and transparent about our process.
Right, it gives everybody in all schools, so you're gonna get Myers 1 year, you're gonna get Hackett 1 year, you're gonna get Rebellion, but there are certainly laws.
It's so disruptive to students. It really is, it really is. I mean, some of our students moved for last year when they were remote because they didn't want, they couldn't be remote. And they're not, they didn't move back to our public school because it would have been another transition. Transitions are not very good. They're all things.
I think the other downside of all the other scenarios, 1 to 10, is do we risk, if North Albany has some struggles now because such a high percentage of the students are in poverty, all of our scenarios, well, the scenarios 1 to 4 will all create a higher percentage of high poverty middle school. Every middle school will have more students in poverty than before because we're going to be doing some spreading out. We don't want to have all the high poverty students in one school, or something like that. Are we at risk of creating 3 North Albany's because we have high poverty now in 3 schools? Higher than we did. It's part of what made Hackett and Myers functioning a little bit better for many years because the percentage of students with such high poverty was lower. You know, does this make sense? And so,
No, it doesn't, because Myers is in receivership.
Myers having a hard time right now.
And that population hasn't changed significantly.
And 6 years ago, nobody sent kids to Hackett.
Yeah.
It was perceived as a dangerous school.
Hackett was receivership.
Yeah.
Right, and then funny how it flips around where people want to be and.
But I also don't think that.
When my oldest son, what's interesting, and I think I said this before, my oldest son, I wasn't on the committee, but they had this committee and they closed down Livingston. And I went to information sessions and there was the discussion of putting 6th and 7th and 8th and 9th into between the two, like all that was discussed at then as well. But I'll tell you, Myers was the school to go to when he was in middle school. That was the school that everybody wanted.
Until recently, yeah.
So, I mean, the trends, it's always gonna roll over. So for me, like, I know that all the administrators and the teachers and the staff work hard across all the schools, no matter what. So it's really both from a staffing and a programmatic and resources, as well as the kind of kids that are gonna end up in the school, how can we give each school that opportunity to thrive? You know, so if you put, more special ed or lower socioeconomic status all in one school, they're gonna have to work like 18 times as hard as a school that has less of that. If you at least spread it out, then, you know, out of 7, if every school has, and he's making up a number, if every school has 300 challenging situations, then that's better than having 600 of your 700 being a challenging situation.
For sure. So sort of what we have now.
So, I mean, you know, how that compares with the scores, can't, you know, pull that out of my head immediately, but, you know, I'm looking for scenarios, like I know we're looking at this and we're looking at scores, and what I'm not gonna be able to do today, although we've been given the information, is what else do each of these elementary schools have going on with them, where, you know, you could have a kid who, based on the scenario, is supposed to go to North Albany, but if North Albany doesn't have the, I don't know what you want to call it, the level of teaching classroom they're gonna need, they're gonna end up having it anyway, which those numbers will even out. I don't think it's gonna be like a big mathematical difference, but it's sort of like we have to take into consideration that as well, because not every, like, recall correctly, not every elementary school, they all have special ed programming, but they all don't have the same exact special ed programming. So you have some kids who have to go to Myers because what they need, that's, it's only offered at Myers. And so with that little bit, like, that's part of what I'm gonna be, you know, that's something I'm gonna have is looking at the scores, but then also comparing each of these scenarios to those additional nuances, and then also the transportation. Wow. Because I don't know what the answer's gonna be to do it, but I'm just looking to find a scenario that's gonna give every school the best opportunity to thrive, not because the resources or the staff isn't there, but because what they have to, you know, what are the challenges they're gonna have. You know, I consider parental involvement and the role that can play in these sectors, huge discrepancy between our different schools about the ability for parental involvement and what that can look like. I know some schools where, and I'll admit, I was one of them, the parents are super obnoxious in how involved they are, and you have other schools where they're saying, we wish our parents could be more involved, but they just don't have that ability for whatever reason. So if we could even it out, that would also give all the middle schools that opportunity to have a good parental involvement foundation as well. Which we're not gonna be able to predict that with scores, but those are the kind of things that we can keep in the back of our mind as we start narrowing down these scenarios.
Also, on the community engagement piece, I think there is at this level, the middle school level, it starts to be more difficult. People are very honest, very talking, you know, it's not like, you don't know what they're thinking, right? But it also becomes a, honestly, I think it's on, the burden is on the district and on the administrators to engage the community where the community is. And I know before COVID, there used to be buses, for parent night, from one school to another. Transportation is a problem. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have it in school event after school. You can have it at a community center that is in the community where most kids are. Kids go, right? So it's a.
And they don't have to, always have to be things where you have to show up.
Yeah.
So what we learned in COVID is being able to stream and get the information and engage your staff and your teachers and your child teachers. It's a real opportunity that we've never used before, but I think opens up the opportunity for parents to participate in ways that they haven't been able to.
Yeah. As long as it has technology in it. It's the flip side of that, right? As long as, and thankfully we all do, right?
Yeah.
And as schools,
Everybody has it. This, you know, we learned this from COVID. Everybody has a cell phone, even if you can't get them all. And right now, we're in a good position for technology. You know?
and as schools that improve, which we hope can be able to do, there can be hybrid models. People who don't have the technology can be bused, and those who do have or want to can, you know, attend virtually. We're not there yet, the school is not ready for that, but there's that potential opportunity in the future.
But aside, so in my head, as we decide what elementary schools, feed into each middle school, I think we also, at the same time, and this is not something that we get to decide here, it's something that the district decides, what the instructional program, how experienced the teachers are going to be in each middle school, all of the things that make a difference in how many social workers are you going to have in each middle school, how many psychologists, how many counselors.
are also to be considered. And I don't doubt the district's commitment to creating an equitable instructional program and environment. I don't doubt that. I know that there are a lot of challenges currently, and they're probably going to continue to be. But I think that is part of it can't really be separated. It has to be presented in the same way in order to create that transparency and buy-in from everybody. That's something, if I choose to stay in Albany and send my child to North Albany, I want to know that. I want to be, I want to understand it and even experience it in a virtual environment or even a physical environment. So I would urge you to not separate the two for as the decisions have been made.
Are there any other committees going on to decide what's best for the children to get the grades up? I mean, this is a good idea, but this is not a cure-all. We need probably about 5 other committees to help.
Well, so this is one piece to the puzzle. So
Yes,
when
it
you think of it holistically, and you think of it in terms of what are the roles and the responsibilities of the different divisions in the organization, it's exactly what you're saying. We have an entire instruction unit that looks at professional development, pedagogy, what are the best practices, what are those things that have been demonstrated to raise our scores, which we have seen. I mean, COVID hit us at a time where we had so much momentum going in all of our schools and showing growth. And, be it a perfect storm or however you want to call it, that was huge. We are seeing higher graduation rates at our high school, and then we have COVID. And fortunately, this group that just passed through, that's the group, because they actually were juniors and then seniors that just graduated in 2021. We have our predictions of where we're looking at what that graduation rate would be, and we're not seeing on our end, these are all unofficial numbers, but on our end, we're not seeing that great of a dip, but we know that there's still a gap. And so that's why, so now I'm going to go back to why are we looking at growth? Because we know that when we see our students grow, then that achievement follows. Because sometimes from point A to point B, that achievement level is here. And you can't tackle. But if you tackle growth and you're moving that needle along the way, then you're going to close that gap. And so, yes, I'm not going to say that there are other committees. We have the other divisions in the district that are looking at the other components through the supervision of our assistant superintendents. When they're doing principal check-ins and they're doing observations, we also have our instructional supervisors who work directly with teachers on what are those strategies to improve the delivery of instruction. We have our coaches that participate in that as well. So all of those things are happening over here while we're doing this.
Well, do any of those items even remotely correlate to this at all?
When you look at the growth of the students, so one of the things that we've been able to do, and Dr. Wilson-Turner can address this with more detail if needed, we have been able to look at consistent curriculum across our elementary schools. And so versus having wonders at this school, food Mifflin at this school, somebody else using something else, and this school decided they don't want to use anything and they're just going to make up everything. We don't have that. So we have gotten to a point where curriculum-wise, materials-wise, we have a base across all of our schools. So that lays that foundation. And then when we talk about how do we incorporate student voice, that comes in consistently, but it may be done differently at particular schools, but also those strategies are consistent among our coaches and our instructional supervisors. So Dr. Wilson-Turner, did you want to add anything, as well as Ms. Bridgewater can add, because she does a lot of the work with our communities?
I mean, I would just say similarly, the work was done around middle school alignment so that the middle school experience is similar academically at each middle school. Granted, it takes into account, the individual needs of students in terms of interventions and support, but there has been an effort in my time and Ms. McKenna's time here to really streamline and have some baseline things that happen at each and every one of our schools. And so yes, each school and each, neighborhood brings a different dynamic to a school, but all of our students present with an educational need that we're responsible for meeting. And, as I listen to you all speak about the evolution of Hackett, over time, where Hackett wasn't the place to be, but, Myers was the place. Like, things are going to continue to evolve in the city, and the constancy has to be what we present educationally to our students and what supports we put in place to ensure that we are, honoring the equitable opportunities that we want to put forth for every single child to be prepared when we are done. And I don't disagree that it'll be a challenging decision, but I think, the conversation tonight really looking at and trying to answer that question, what's our ideal, and what type of balance are we attempting to strike between the academic needs that may be presented in a building and then the needs of our families, in shifting, will be challenging. And that will be the work of this team to really come to the best possible decision. And as Ms. Bridgewater said, really preset communities and have effective communication around why this is the best possible scenario that we find ourselves in. Because when you have two middle schools basically in the same part of the city and one way over here, there isn't in any way easy way to make that decision.
No, and I was thinking about what you said about program. And I honestly, I think the hardest part for this committee is making a decision. Because I remember, I was actually one of the last principals at Livingston. Once the committee decided where schools were going, programmatically, the district did an amazing job of laying out how the programs were going to be equitable. And so I don't think that's going to be an issue for us in terms of resources and programs. This is the hard part of coming to a decision about where we're going to send kids and why we came to that decision. And I do want to push that we eliminate any option that puts all of our lowest economic schools in one building.
Or even the lowest performing.
The lowest performing and lowest, yeah.
Go ahead and hand off.
Well, not always,
No,
the performance ranges.
Not always.
Not always, and if you look at where these fifth graders are, there's some differences. Some schools make better growth than others.
There's definitely correlations, but there's other areas where you can't, it doesn't explain like why. It doesn't explain the why, although I like what you said about, Ms. Adams, about, the difference between achievement and growth. So when we, just when I get a chance to take a deeper look at this, hearing you say that is going to have me look at these charts differently, because it's like, which scenario is going to promote what we're saying here is that predicted growth or that potential growth, which scenario is going to do that, because then it also makes me think about what you were saying, and you references the commitment is going to be there to make sure it's equitable. No matter which scenario we pick, the goal is going to be that all kids get what they need at each of the middle schools. The question is, how hard are they going to have to work if they have all of this school, all of these, say of these three schools, all in the same middle school, they're going to have to work, like we said, 18 times as hard. If we don't do that, then it'll give the district an ability to apply their resources more easily.
Well, when I think, I'm looking at this one that says all, and it combines the two. I think it's a misnomer in the community. Like, all of our schools have the capacity to meet the average growth. Like, they're not that far away. So while people may think there are some capacity issues, all of our schools are demonstrating the capacity to meet the average growth from year to year.
And what are the factors that are being, not that I doubt the growth, the growth, the predicted growth, what are the factors that are used to determine these growth percentile?
We use a NWEA nationally normed assessment. And so these scores come out of there, these growth percentiles compared to the national norm. Kids who are in the same grade, kids who are like kids, we get to these.
So is the growth, potential growth, is it because you can see kind of like the progress over time between the different NWAs?
Yeah, so you'll look at fall to winter,
Yeah,
and we have a baseline in the fall, we see how much growth, kids are given a target of growth, and teachers work to address those skills that have been demonstrated to have these scores.
And really importantly, like every single school should be at least the 50th conditional growth percentile. Because what we say is 1 year worth of instruction gets you that. That's a baseline. You did what you were supposed to do. And when we're looking at balancing these schools, what we talked about earlier is you need the 60s, the 70s, the 80s to close the instructional gap for your lowest performance students. But your lowest performing students also have the most potential for growth. And, that really becomes the challenge for the schools is to really accelerate growth for students within a school year and then over, a series of school years to close that gap.
So those of us, for the parents who haven't gotten it in a while, the little chart of NWA scores that we typically get twice a year. It's been a while, so, if I remember correctly, it starts from like the fall and goes over, it's over a year. And that correlates closely with performance in state tests, correct? So I actually am a big believer in using growth as opposed to actual scores. That though presents a bit of a challenge communication-wise for all of us, because most parents look at the state scores, look at the actual scores, and that doesn't give you growth. That doesn't tell you whether or not your child actually learned over time and become better, or whether it just tells you whether your school is bad or good. And that's something that we're gonna have to explain very, very well to everyone in the community, and so that we can understand it as parents. So just because there is this score, that doesn't make my kid's school bad, right? And intuitively, we know this because we know how our kids are doing in the school. But perception is reality.
well, I think what Mark, and I believe we might have said this, regardless of what scenario we choose, the fellow parents in the community, they're gonna have to be educated and have that information available, and then they're gonna have to either understand it, accept it, or not understand it, or not accept it. It's really just being able to be clear on why we made the decision we made once we made it. Or, and I'm imagining it's not gonna be like a definitive decision, it's gonna be like sort of like, this is our choice recommendations, and then the district and the board will take it from there.
Well, with how many people went to my daughter's open house a week or two ago, I don't think many people are going to attend those sessions. I think there were maybe a quarter of the people that attended the virtual open house, which is too bad. I just don't know if the community they don't want to do it.
I would guarantee because the schools are good, middle schools are going to be, the parents will start to go down to the,
I'd like to believe that without having the open house.
Well,
I don't know.
I think the difference with the open house is it was a community commitment. I mean, it went from like, 6 to 8:30, and I think, I did a high school and like a middle school, I think we did, a pretty good job, especially considering it was the first one trying to use that format, so there were technical issues, but then things that worked out. That's really different than click on this link and watch this 20-minute information section.
I think let them able to do that.
And if it's recorded, then it can be sent out, people can watch it at their own pace, and then have opportunities for Q&A and things like that. I think there are formats to get the information out, and I mean, I would imagine, like, I know I'm gonna send it to everybody I know, and just be like, you have questions, make sure you ask them, and I don't know how much of a reach my sphere of influence will be, but do what I can with the people that I know. So just that attempt to get all that information out. I did have one quick question, because I was talking to someone about something else. What is the expected academic year that this would go into, that whatever the changes that the new year would go into effect?
The 22-23 school year, next year.
Oh, right.
And it's the idea that students who are already in the school, seventh graders are already in the school, they would stay in the middle school. Review.
That's why it would be the phase-in with the fifth grade.
So the phase, oh, it would be from their fifth grade. So someone who's in fifth grade right now doesn't necessarily know what middle school they're in.
Correct.
Oh, my friend was right. I was like, oh, we're gonna be at night together next year. She's like, it depends on what those feeder people say. I'm like, oh, I am one of those feeder people.
So we're down to about 7 minutes, and I'd like for us to look at next steps. And some of the notes that I have from this conversation, making our schools productive for everyone, making sure that we maintain open enrollment as an option, looking at transportation, families that have multi-children. We talked about parental involvement and community engagement, and then the instructional opportunities, making sure that we give each school an opportunity to provide for our children. Okay, and so from here, what I would like to know is, what is it that the committee needs from the district? Did you want to just kind of leave it open-ended and work through the scenarios that you have and just kind of process that? When we come back, what is the goal of the next meeting? Do we want to be able to talk about the 2 or 3 scenarios that we might present to the board with a rationale statement? Are we at that point yet, or do we need more discussion before we get to the point of formalizing a recommendation to the board?
I think I've written down what exactly are the requirements for this also. I think some of it was like location.
You did get that.
We did, I just, if we could get a quick bulletin, this is what we have to follow, that we are following it.
So we can, Mr. Lesko, we can push that back out.
So it sounds like if you're more interested in balancing by growth instead of balancing by the test scores you provided with earlier, you know, I'm planning to go back to the kind of scenarios and plug in this data. Is this the best data to be using for our growth? I think it is.
Yes.
And just see what, you know, then what do we come up with? That's really my personal perspective. Sorry, go ahead.
I have a question about data here. Is this, because I'm not sure, are his calculations, is he using the methodology that the district is using to look at?
I think we do average scores. I mean, I might be wrong, but I'm thinking these are average scores. They don't match. We use the scores, not the growth. I'm wondering, and it's up to him whether he can do that below the red, like, looks like he's red and green. We can get these growth.
Yeah, I'll do that. I mean, I can't modify his unless maybe I could request access from him.
Would we go to the answer?
Yeah,
we did, that's an email.
Yeah, I think you can download it.
Yeah,
I made a copy and then I messed around with the color that columns. Can we request from the district, the current number of students in grade 5 to then as a guess year?
Oh, okay. That's the 2020, 21, 22 school population.
Maybe we can get also maybe the past 5 years of grade 5, just to see trends. Because I know there's some graders just don't do well, some it might be a first year teacher, you know, might be an outlier that just really wants to class up.
2 years.
So by 5th grade,
Yeah, and I'm hoping I have time.
well, we look at like 3 years.
Yeah,
3 years, okay, yeah.
And I guess it's different than what we already got. I thought we already did get something about what it was in the president's solution.
We did we did scores, so we could do both.
And then are we still, is it still the case that the plan is to do a language to stay happy with the Spanish teachers are, or is that more up in the air?
We're up in the air on that because again, that's a program that can move. It doesn't have to be Hackett.
Yeah.
But that may be something that the committee chooses to leave in place. So.
That actually reminds me, what would be helpful to know is any special programming for school, because if, like you guys said, you can make a recommendation to leave it where it is or move it. But between the special ed programming and, I mean, I guess it would be good to know. I only know just because I know someone that there's, I think it's sort of a really one-to-one, I might be getting that wrong. But I know a young woman who she was having difficulty in the class, but she couldn't leave the class because that level was only available to her at that. That's the only place she can have that particular class.
So what we can do is look at what program is.
Yeah, just to know where they are, because then.
But they may not stay there.
Huh?
It
They may move.
It depends on the needs of the kids at the time.
Yeah,
And
so it might
so
move.
you might have 8 today,
Yeah,
and then next year you don't need the class.
yeah,
And so, you know, the special ed department looks to try and build some equity amongst all schools, but also they consider building programs within schools so that kids don't have to move every year.
yeah,
You know, so all of that, and then it all depends on who the kids are
yeah.
at the time and what the needs are.
One typical question. When do we need to have a recommendation to the board by?
Yeah,
Because that's gonna be a recommendation.
So the board process is, they would like to have a decision by the end of the year so that we can start notifying parents. However, if it were to ease into January, it would be okay.
Let's
So
say.
you know we have to present at one meeting and then they will, once we share it, then they're gonna wanna have conversation and we may have to come back a couple of times. And then we move toward action. So we're talking maybe a 2 to 3 meeting process.
And will this time frame allow both, hopefully by the spring we'll be able to do this school? I think that's in this process, not leaving. Once the decision has been made, I really, really do believe that the community and the parents of the schools that are going to be feeding, any one of the middle schools should have the opportunity to go visit, see the school, bring their kids, see where it is, what it has to offer. Because again, that's going to be all of it.
Well, and those are the, if you recall, we had started, again, COVID interrupted, but we had a whole different process for student ambassadors to come into the school. And every student had an opportunity to see that school before they got there, before they transitioned there. We just changed that process. I go back to what Dr. Wilson Turner said about the middle school curriculum file. That's roughly under the leadership of Ms. McKenna and with Karen Bechtel and with our instructional supervisors and coaches and administrators and teachers on the committee. That process is roughly 2 years old that we had that. And, not that it changed during COVID, but that delivery did change because we had to shift, to the remote learning. And so keeping that in place and knowing that that's our foundation, we at least have that. So.
Yeah, and I think geographically too, right? People are gonna wanna know. So having a community meeting with our Myers or Hackett or at Middle Clover would be really good idea.
I think those orientations work well when people were able, we would take kids over to go and see the school, but also when we built in, and I don't want to say built in, when we enhanced that process of the summer transition.
Yeah.
Where sixth graders, if you were sixth grade and fifth grade, you were able to go to that school for the summer, 1 or 2 weeks, see what it was like, and you got your locker combination, you saw your classroom, all those little things that we don't think are big deals, they're huge in the lives of the child.
Those orientations are excellent. All three members are on it.
I'm gonna say, we've always done that.
Yeah, they've always, that's always been.
And that's
Except for the COVID.
Except for the COVID year.
Well,
And this may be a COVID year, so we may have to be strategic.
Of course.
But we still do
But
some.
it still happened this summer. It's still, even though this was, it's still, maybe they didn't have it last summer, but they did.
No, parents getting in.
Oh, parents.
No, and the sixth graders were now seventh graders didn't have that.
Yes, the sixth graders.
So not first year of COVID, but the ones who didn't know
Yeah.
that. And we were in that.
Because that was the critical COVID.
Yeah.
The other thing that I want to compliment the schools on, because they did the best they could last year, not the one we're in, is they did those, and I attended multiple ones because I hope they're not wrong, and they didn't have the right technology, so I watched 8 of them. But like, it was like a orientation and tour of the school, like electronically, so it was like, these are all the different math teachers, and these are all the different gym teachers, and this is what the office staff looks like, and this is what it looks like to pick up your lunch. Like, those were, at our elementary school, those were excellent too. So COVID is hopefully not worse, but if we can't get parents, then that can be, that's something that COVID can't really be done. I know, like, asking input in some ways can make our jobs harder, but we had talked early on about an opportunity for parents to, and community members talk about what their values were, and I'm wondering where we want to integrate that if we want.
We can look at our next meeting, is what I'd like to do is set a time for our next meeting, and then we can put that on the agenda and build that in as we. So time frame for our next meeting, are we looking at roughly 2 weeks, 3 weeks? 2 or 3?
I'd rather give ourselves a push, not that I think we want to do this
3?
forever. No,
2?
2. I'd like to give ourselves a push in December. I think.
Got it.
Anyone else?
So 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and does this is a Thursday night, does Thursday or Wednesday work?
I would say the 27th Wednesday is better.
So the 27th is a Wednesday?
I can do, I have a.
I probably can't do either.
And I think you have a board meeting on the 28th.
There is, you have a meeting.
I have a meeting.
You have a meeting on the 21st.
I mean, we could do 3 if we want. We have.
Yeah, can you do November 4th? That's 3 days.
And that's a board meeting.
That's a board meeting.
And so 3rd, you can't do Wednesday, you said?
No, I have to work.
And how are Tuesdays for people? 26th or the 2nd?
Extend the second, I mean, not that we could be the second, but there's school this year on election. I'm not sure they're here again. There is school.
What about the 26th? Are we good for the 26th?
Yeah, that would be.
Then the 26th today?
What do we expect? Yeah.
And I didn't see if you wrote back to me, I apologize. Can we get the dual language NWA growth also in advance of the next meeting so we can play with those numbers?
I will see.
Okay.
I'll see what we can
Okay, I mean, I realize these specific classes.
I'll see what we can do.
And we started at 6 tonight?
6 o'clock, yes,
Okay, on the 26th.
On the 26th, is that what we decided?
yes. Okay, so I think we are ready. And then we will get information out, and then we will be ready to look at what probably needle down towards some recommendations. And I think one of the things we have to keep in mind, we don't have to have one solid answer. If we take 2 or 3 recommendations to the board, that gives them something to talk about and analyze, and then maybe ask some questions back. And then it may come down to 2, and then we may be asked to do a little homework with that, and then come back. So I think that's fine. I don't want anyone to feel the pressure that we have to have one answer and one answer only. We don't have to do that.
Well, it was beneficial to break down these numbers, because now it's easier, like, I tried, and I was getting like the gist, but I didn't understand the difference between the growth percentile and the numbers, and I learned it because the word growth made out for this before the meeting, so that's between, for the next 2 weeks, I'm hoping to be able to come back and have a better sense of how I'm feeling about the different scenarios. So today was helpful to break this down and get some.
This was a really good work session. So, thank you all so very much. Have a great evening, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Good evening. I think you want to say something to do more.
Absolutely.
I got one of the